From Cincinnati to Brooklyn, How Roebling's Bridges Impacted a Nation. Presented by Group I.
One of the biggest features of the Brooklyn Bridge is the suspension cables that hold the bridge up. Our group is connecting the Cincinnati Bridge and the Brooklyn Bridge, which were both suspension bridges that were designed by John Roebling. The Cincinnati Bridge was developed first, therefore we can see how it directly influenced the making of the Brooklyn Bridge. Although the Cincinnati Bridge isn't the first suspension bridge, it is the first one John Roebling designed. So a direct connection can be made based on his experience with the Cincinnati Bridge.
Background of the bridge. The Cincinnati-Covington Bridge spans the Ohio River between Cincinnati, Ohio, and Covington, Kentucky. When people crossed the bridge for the first time on December 1st, 1866, the bridge was the longest suspension bridge in the world.
Necessity. In the 1850s, merchants needed a way to transport commerce by means other than relying on Mother Nature. The Ohio River was already very crowded with steamboats, so the solution was a suspension bridge. Furthermore, in 1861, when the Civil War began, Union troops would need to get across the Ohio River to build defenses in Covington in case of an invasion in Cincinnati. Thus, a permanent bridge was crucial. Today, pedestrians use the bridge to travel between the arenas in Ohio and the restaurants in northern Kentucky. Like the Brooklyn Bridge, this bridge serves as unity between people and mobility of goods from two prosperous cities.
Social implications of the bridge. Plans to the Cincinnati Bridge were widely supported as the bridge's completion would allow for the citizens to cross more easily from Ohio to Kentucky at a reduced expense in comparison to paying for ferry boats. Additionally, the completion of the bridge would ensure a spread of commerce in the already prominent port city. There were conflicting societal views over the construction of the bridge because it allowed slaves to travel from the slave state Kentucky on one side of the bridge to the free northern state of Ohio on the other side. For slaves, the Cincinnati Bridge was a symbol of movement and progress, just as the Brooklyn Bridge would later be for immigrants, as well as other Americans.
Health events. Dangerous working conditions and little pay were the biggest issues regarding the health of the workers. Wages in 1860 would have been about 78 cents per day, and bridge laborers would have had about half the purchasing power of their counterparts who worked on the Brooklyn Bridge years later. The laborers did hard work and would have burned almost 2,500 calories per day. While the money they made may have been enough for individuals to get by, supporting a family was difficult, and affording the necessary food to maintain good nutrition for the work was even harder. While decompensation sickness wasn't an issue since caissons were not used, wire rope was still a relatively new invention at the time that the Cincinnati Bridge was being built, and presented high-risk situations to those whose job it was to install them. Washington Roebling himself had a near-death situation caused by the failure to attach an iron cable correctly.
Economical effects. Bridging the Ohio River between Cincinnati and Covington facilitated commercial contact which spurred the economic growth of Covington. The bridge offered to transfer busy merchants in a rapid manner to surrounding towns, villages, and country seats. Evening entertainment businesses such as lectures and concerts offered in the city of Cincinnati may now be enjoyed by the denizens of Covington. The steamboat and ferry businesses were scared about the loss of their market due to the bridge, and this same opposition would be seen 30 years later in the making of the Brooklyn Bridge.
Political implications. The construction of the Cincinnati Bridge was influenced heavily by political events. Politicians argued whether its construction would benefit both states economically and politically, and slavery, which was a highly controversial issue at the time, brought about concerns with a connection between the North and the South. Furthermore, the election of 1860 had an impact on the construction of the bridge because, as a result, the Civil War began in 1861. With the war, building the bridge was not a priority, but as Union troops needed to get across the Ohio River for defense purposes in case of an invasion from the Confederacy, the bridge became a crucial link between cities and later served as a gateway to the South. The onset of the Civil War underscored the importance of communication between the North and South. Finally, the Cincinnati Bridge represented technological innovation, but also, due to its geographical connections, it paved the way to political unity in the U.S., which was the same case for the Brooklyn Bridge.
Technical aspects of the Cincinnati Bridge. In Roebling's time, the main bridge design used for suspension bridges were unstiffened bridges. However, this kind of bridge was vulnerable to wind loads that swayed the bridge. Using his intuition, he designed the stayed suspension bridge, implemented during the beginning of his career and refined to become the hybrid cable stayed bridge designed for the Brooklyn Bridge. Washington Roebling mentions in his memoirs that his special investigations were directed towards deep foundations, more particularly to the use of compressed air and caissons, all of which had a bearing on a possible Brooklyn Bridge of the future. He suggests here that it was on this project he came up with the idea of and was able to research the possibility of using caissons for future bridge foundation construction.
The Cincinnati Bridge is a cultural symbol. Bridges connect people and facilitate the blending of cultures. Information travels more rapidly, and cultural traditions are easily shared. The bridges themselves are cultural material artifacts that tell a story through their symbology. In 1866, the Cincinnati Covington Bridge symbolized unity and progress in a postbellum America. The otherwise war-torn states of Ohio and Kentucky were able to prosper with an increase in commerce, and people could look to the future with confidence. In his book, Brooklyn Bridge, Fact and Symbol, academic Alan Trachtenberg explains that Roebling felt the symbology of the bridges he built was very important. He considered matter as an expression of spirit, thinking of his suspension bridges as monuments to the spirit of progress and the harmony of nature. Perhaps this deep spiritual connection to the physicality of the technology is what has inspired so many artists and poets to interpret Roebling's bridges in their work to this day.
Conclusion. The Cincinnati and Brooklyn bridges were seen icons of the nation's history, culture, and society as they represent the ideals and values of the people. Roebling's innovative design and technological ingenuity makes these engineering masterpieces significant legacies to the modern world. In the words of engineer Roebling, thus united by strong cords of wire, we all fervently hope, for the sake of a common country, that these two great commonwealths will forever continue to use this national highway as a perpetual link of mutual interests and amiable relations, commercially as well as socially and politically.